Senate Elections Chair Zellner Myrie, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you.
So you have this new report out about the election system in New York. It's very comprehensive. You had a hearing about this. You've heard from a lot of people about this. How do we fix our election system? But I think the question a lot of New Yorkers might face when thinking about that is, what's wrong with our election system? So can we start there? What do you see as the top problems in the state's election system?
Well, we know after every single election, we end up in headlines for the wrong reason. Most recently, in the New York 22nd, it was the last congressional race called not in the state, but in the entire country. We've had counties like Rensselaer and Saratoga, where early voting sites were not placed correctly, led to litigation. The Attorney General had to step in. And of course, in New York City, where we've seen mishap after mishap after mishap. Yeah. So the administration of elections, it is the infrastructure of our democracy. How they are administered, how people feel when they go to the voting booth, how long they wait on lines, whether or not their absentee ballots are returned. A lot of those problems are structural. We have a commissioner system that requires bipartisanship in some parts of the state that has led to stalemate. It has led to no accountability. There's some operational problems. We don't train our poll workers. Right. We don't have a standardization on what it means to be a commissioner. Some commissioners are full-time, others are part-time. So we went about 46 pages in the report, a lot of details in there, but the top line is election administration is the infrastructure of our democracy. It's important that we do that in the best way we can.
Now, as you're thinking about this, is this more of a problem with these local boards of elections, or is this more of like a state level law problem? Because I'm hearing about the 22nd Congressional District, which was a mess. Mm-hmm. The New York City Board of Elections is a mess. So where do you come at it from?
So I think it's a little bit of both, Dan. We have a state board of elections that really does not serve as an oversight body for our local boards of elections. So you think about in the races where things have gone wrong, or if you're a voter in a county where things have gone wrong, who do you complain to about the Board of Elections? Ideally, you would have an oversight agency to say, hey, they don't have their act together. Here are the penalties for doing so. We don't have that. So one of the recommendations that we make is that the State Board of Elections serve as an oversight agency, and if not the State Board of Elections, some other entity, so that there is accountability in the process. We also have to remember that many of our local boards of elections, they have a small staff. In New York City, it's a pretty big staff, but about 28 of our boards of elections, they have 6 people or less to run everything: voter registration, absentee registration, election day, early voting. And so they need more resources, they need training, they need standardization, and they need support from the State Board of Elections.
Yeah, I was reading a story last year during last year's election, and I remember reading a story about this one Board of Elections, a local one, an employee who was saying that she was the only person handling these absentee ballots, and she was just getting hundreds a day. So I can definitely see the staffing problem. But you mentioned in New York City they have a lot of staff. So what's the deal there? Why is this so messed up there? Why do we keep on seeing these problems with the New York City Board of Elections?
So let me say that I know many New York City Board of Elections employees who go to work every day, and their goal is to administer our democracy in the best way possible. They do so in a good faith effort, but they're operating in a system where we allow for incompetence to flourish and that there's no penalty for that incompetence. And the political parties are the ones doing the hiring. Only in New York City are the Republican and Democratic parties the appointing authority and the thread through which accountability flows. We think that that should change, and that's really the basis of the discussion that we hope to put forward in the next legislative session.
You know, in terms of beefing things up, in terms of staffing at the local level and possibly new laws or regulations, I can already hear the county saying that it's going to cost too much money and they're not going to be able to afford it. So what do you do about that?
So we reference this in the report. The need for resources is not a new claim. This is something that I've heard since assuming the chairmanship of the Elections Committee. Every year we have fought for more money for the local boards. And what I tell my colleagues is if you think it's too expensive to give a local board the money that they need, you tell me what the price of democracy is. How much are you willing to pay for integrity and credibility in our elections process? And so we say, yes, we're happy to give more resources and to fight for that, but there also has to be some responsibility that you maintain that funding so all of these staffing issues that we're discussing won't be as much of a problem.
You know, access to the ballot box is obviously very important. And we saw earlier this month, voters rejected 2 amendments no absentee voting, and same-day voter registration. So given that, in your report you have many recommendations, but what are you saying should be done to increase that voter access because we don't have these constitutional amendments now?
This should be a 5-alarm fire to anyone that cares about our democracy. The fact that we had 2 pro-voter propositions fail, it's an outrage. The fact that it was defeated shows us that we have to continue the fight and we have to put our markers down and say we're going to protect the voters' rights. That's going to be number one to us. That's going to be what access is about. It's just like customer service. You go to a restaurant, you have a bad experience, you're not going back. When we talk about administering our elections, if you have a bad experience voting, you're not going to vote again. Right. So in order to keep people to come back to say this is your democracy, it's your constitutional right, we have to make the process as seamless as possible.
You know, access to voting has somehow become a political issue where people think that reforms like you're suggesting may lead to voter fraud, and we're talking about election integrity. How do you convince people that that's not going to happen?
It's not an easy job, Dan. We saw just last week with the propositions failing that misinformation is potent, and playing on people's emotions and fears, as disingenuous as it might be, as I believe unscrupulous as it might be, it is effective. So we have to battle that misinformation with facts. The facts lay bare that voter fraud is not an issue in our elections, that you have a greater likelihood of being struck by lightning than for there to be an instance of voter fraud. But somehow that has been able to flourish in our current conversation around our democracy. We literally had people storm our Capitol over alleged voter fraud. This is serious business. And so we have an obligation to put the facts out, make it as easy as possible. And really, my goal has been to take New York from worst to first. That journey continues, and it's one that I look forward to pushing next session.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you come up with. And I don't think it's a discussion that's going to end anytime soon, so we'll keep an eye on it.
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. New York, we fancy ourselves the progressive capital of the nation. We can't do so if we're not protecting voting rights.
All right, Senator Zellner-Myrie, thank you.
Thanks for having me.